Hey guys, welcome to Intelligent Faith 315. My name is Pastor Jay. It's good to be with you guys. Today we're going to be continuing on with our series, Ancient Non-Christian Historical Sources for the Life of Jesus of Nazareth. You probably saw this on our post last week by the time this video records, but recently they just found a seal from the city of Bethlehem. In Hebrew, I believe it has the Aramaic words of Bethlehem and some other words as well, but it's a 2,700-year-old seal, and it happens to be, if it turns out to be genuine, the oldest artifact that we have referring to the biblical city of Bethlehem. And the reason for its significance, of course, is that if it turns out to be genuine, it's going to be the oldest archaeological artifact mentioning that city and thus verifying the biblical account of the city where Jesus was born and historically, etc. So I do encourage you to look at that post on our website if you haven't had a chance to do so. There's a link there that takes you over to a fuller length article and gives you some cool pictures about the seal they found and some in-depth information. So I encourage you to do that. But as I said, we're going to be continuing on with our series today, Ancient Non-Christian Historical Evidence for the Life of Jesus. Before we do that, two announcements. On May 31st of this month, I'm going to be starting to teach an apologetic discipleship class once again. It's called Reasons to Believe. I'm going to be teaching that at Calvary Chapel of Puerto Rico. And the reason I'm announcing that to you guys is because we're going to be having these recorded. And so after the class has begun, on a consistent basis, I'll be putting up links to the class. It's going to start off with just a basic introduction to apologetics, why it's important, the biblical nature of it, the historical nature of it, the practical nature of apologetics. But again, if you're interested, you can keep your eyes open for those links, Reasons to Believe, good evidence and proof for the Christian worldview and faith, and those will be coming your way shortly. And then also just wanted to remind you that we do have a giveaway that we're doing on Intelligent Faith 315. Just recently, about a week or so ago, we passed our 10,000th view. We've been up and running for less than a year, and we've had over 10,000 hits on the site, so thank you very much for that. Most of our viewers are from the U.S. and also from Puerto Rico, but we also have a good group of viewers from the Ukraine, from Canada, from certain European countries, Middle East, and even Far East. So we welcome all of you, especially if you are skeptical, if you're non-Christian, if you're atheist, agnostic, so forth. If you're curious and seeking for the truth, we're glad you're with us. But also, if you're believers, we're glad you're here. We want to confirm you in your faith and build you up and edify you. So thank you to all of you guys for your support. But since we did cross over that 10,000 mark, we're doing a giveaway. And just to let you know again what it is, Lee Strobel, he's not an academic apologist, but he's a popularizer is what he's called. He's very good. He has 3 really good DVDs. You may have seen them. They're called The Case for a Creator, Case for Christ, and Case for Faith. So these deal with scientific apologetics, philosophical or psychological apologetics, and then also some historical apologetics. And they're done very well, very visually pleasing, and it's just a really great presentation that he does. He did them in collaboration, I believe, with Illustra Media and Discovery Center for Science and Culture. So anyway, we're giving away these 3 DVDs in kind of a collector's edition pack from Lee Strobel, all 3 DVDs together. And all you have to do to win this giveaway, and if you're in China, we'll send it to China. If you're in Germany, we'll send it to Deutschland. Mein Bruder und mein Freunde in Deutschland, and we'll send it to you guys as well. Wherever you are, we'll send it to you. All we'd like for you to do is to make about a 2-minute video and just letting us know and letting everybody who watches Intelligent Faith know how apologetics and learning how to defend your faith has helped you in your Christian walk, has helped you in your walk with Christ and sharing your faith and living out your faith. How apologetics and being trained on how to defend and share the Christian worldview has helped you, and also perhaps how Intelligent Faith, how this ministry and this site has been a blessing into your life. And it's real simple, so just make a real laid-back, relaxed 2-minute video. You can just turn your iPhone on and flip it around and record yourself real quick. Doesn't have to be anything very fancy at all. Just throw it on YouTube, throw it on Vimeo. You can throw it wherever you want, really. Just send us the link. You can send that to us directly off Intelligent Faith. There's a little box down there on the right-hand side where you can post your questions, but you could also post the link in there if you'd like. And whoever has, what we deem to be kind of the coolest, most interesting video, we're going to post it on the site, and we're going to announce that person's identity and where they live and stuff like that, and we're going to, of course, send them that 3-disc kind of a collector's edition DVD set from Lee Strobel as a prize for the 10,000th view giveaway. So I encourage you to keep that in your mind. Looking forward to getting some interesting videos and so forth. I know that you guys probably like to check into Intelligent Faith and then leave and go about your life. Most of us are information consumers today. I tend to be like that as well. It's very rare that we'll slow down and write an email. It would be almost impossible for any of us to write a letter or a thank you card or something like that. So I know it's kind of challenging, and that's why I say if you want to just do it real quick on your phone or something like that. But if you could do that for us, for all the content we've tried to hook you up with and to bless you with and to encourage your life, just take a couple minutes, and it'd just be a real big blessing to us to see and just get some feedback from some of you guys as to how the Lord may be using this information, this truth, these resources in your life to help you and to bless you. So, all right, well, let's continue on with our series today. As I said before, ancient non-Christian historical sources for the life of Jesus of Nazareth. And again, I really do encourage you guys to get a solid handle on this information. What I'll probably do pretty soon, I think I did this a couple of months back, but I'm going to repost again a kind of a chart that I made that has to do with a really quick glance. It lays out for you the 17 non-Christian historical sources of Christ in about a 2-page glance. It's a full-color PDF. And I really just do encourage you to kind of commit that image or commit the list of names and documents to memory. It's really not that hard. It's just 17 different things. And the reason I say that is because it's quite frequent that we're going to come into contact with people that really doubt the historical, verifiable existence of Jesus of Nazareth. And of course, this is one of the great things about the Christian faith and worldview, is that it is verifiable. And of course, Paul the Apostle told us in 1 Corinthians 15, he says that if Christ is not raised, then our faith is in vain. But before you can verify if Christ actually, literally, physically, historically rose from the dead, you of course have to verify, did he even historically, literally, physically exist? And so these non-Christian historical sources are of great importance and of great strategic value in talking with people. I can't tell you how many times I hear this question come up, and I just want to blurt out the answer as I'm listening to some kind of an online lecture or some kind of a debate going on. And it's quite shocking even how many Christians, pastors or supposed scholars are unaware, they're ignorant of this great information. And I take my hat off to Dr. Gary Habermas from Liberty University. He is I think the world's foremost expert on this, and everybody else has gleaned it from him. And these ancient non-Christian sources can be found in numerous publications from Dr. Habermas. The Verdict of History is one, or as I said, you can go to his website, GaryHabermas.com, and you can download basically the dissertation paper that I'm reading from as we go through this series, so you can have that information for yourself. But as I said, the late Christopher Hitchens, praying for his family and stuff. It's very sad. Hopefully the Lord would reach out and touch them. I believe his brother, by the way, Peter Hitchens, the brother of Christopher Hitchens, I do believe he's a Christian. I believe Peter Hitchens, his brother, has a book called How Atheism Led Me to God, or something of that nature. So I'm checking into that myself. I do encourage you to check that out. It seems that Christopher Hitchens' brother is a Christian, so I hope that his parents, of course, are Christians as well. But keep them in your prayers, please. We do pray for his family. But Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and many of the other new atheists and just, amateur atheists and so forth on the internet infidels, and a lot of these other websites, a lot of these guys are simply ignorant of the fact of the tremendous historical evidence that exists for verifying Christ's life, his ministry, his birth, the outflow of his following, the early first century church, etc. So if we know of this information, it's a great tool and a great piece of discussion to put upon the table when you're engaging folks, talking about your faith, etc., just to establish the rock-solid fact that before we even begin to talk about who is Jesus, does God exist, does Christian theism even make sense or anything like that, that Jesus actually did historically, literally exist. So this is very, very important. So again, let me just run through some of the sources that we've already talked about. We talked about some ancient historians. Among those that we already covered were Flavius Josephus, he was a Jewish historian, Tacitus, Roman historian, Suetonius, another Roman historian, Julius Africanus, who I believe was a early church father, also a historian, and then Thallus. Okay, so those are some of the ancient historians we covered. So try to commit those to mind: Josephus, Suetonius, Tacitus, Julius Africanus, and Thallus. And then also we talked about certain government sources, non-Christian government sources that verified the historical existence of Jesus. Two of them happen to be Roman emperors, okay? Verifiable historical figures of the Roman Empire, Emperor Trajan and Emperor Hadrian. But then also a government official named Pliny the Younger. And all three of these individuals from the Roman government gave historical credibility and mention of the fact of Jesus' historical existence. Also some Gentile sources: Lucian, he was a Greek satirist, and then also a man named Marabar Serapion, who was a Greek man in prison writing to his son, but in this letter he mentions the existence of Jesus. And then, of course, today we're going to be continuing on with some Gnostic sources. We already mentioned as Gnostic sources the Gospel of Truth and the Apocryphon of John. Today we're going to be covering two more Gnostic sources. We're going to be covering the Gospel of Thomas, which is from the 2nd century AD, and then the Treatise on the Resurrection, which also is from probably around the 2nd century AD. After that, we've got two more Gnostic sources, and then two more Jewish sources, and we will be done. So we're coming to a close on the series. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully I've been conveying the information in a semi-interesting way, not putting you to sleep. But again, I do encourage you to download this dissertation paper from Dr. Gary Habermas. His website again, GaryHabermas.com. You can get it for free, along with an interesting book called The Thomas Factor, dealing with doubt, emotional doubt, intellectual doubt, and volitional doubt. A lot of great stuff. And I do encourage you also to listen to Dr. Habermas's teachings on the Shroud of Turin, which we're going to do some posts on that in the future, which is the most studied archaeological artifact in history, the Shroud of Turin, supposedly the burial garment of Jesus. And I am about 85%, perhaps 90% convinced that it is indeed, it's not just a genuine artifact, everybody knows that, but I'm about 90% convinced that it's probably the actual garment that was wrapped around Jesus at his burial. Fascinating archaeological artifact. So listen to some MP3s on the Shroud of Turin on Dr. Habermas's website. But then also, he has some interesting lectures on near-death experiences, which, if you're like me, about 10 years ago, I thought that was kind of a, hocus-pocus pseudoscience and really just a bunch of nonsense. But actually, there are a couple of hundred incredibly verifiable near-death experiences, and the value for apologetics is this, is that it can go a long way in establishing the existence of the immaterial part of human beings. You can call that a mind, you can call that a soul or a spirit, but near-death experiences, the heavily verifiable ones, the quality ones, and this is what Dr. Habermas deals with. He's done some great research on this with some great individuals. He's got some really interesting lectures and teachings on near-death experiences and just some accounting and some interesting stories and research that's been conducted on that. So I encourage you to check that stuff out, along with downloading this dissertation paper. Okay, so here we go. Today we're going to talk about the Gospel of Thomas and the Treatise on the Resurrection, both Gnostic literature from, I believe, the 2nd century AD. All right, the Gospel of Thomas. Now let me just say, if you have seen or read the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown, who also authored Angels and Demons, Dan Brown, by the way, is an incredibly uninformed man concerning the true history of the Christian church. Dan Brown, for example, says that Jesus Christ was not worshipped as God until after the Council of Nicaea, which happened in 325 AD. That's not true. A huge number, almost all New Testament scholars today, even the ones that are not Christian, the ones that are agnostic or atheistic, they've established that Binitarian worship, which is the worship of God the Father and of Jesus, by meaning two, Binitarian worship was going on in the early 30s AD. For example, Larry Hurtado from Edinburgh University has established that Binitarian worship was already happening at that time. So Dan Brown is incredibly misinformed and really ignorant in that area. But also, for example, he says that At the Council of Nicaea, it was an incredibly close call as to whether the church was going to vote in the affirmative to worship Christ as divine or in the negative and not worship him. He said it was a really close call. That, again, is an incredibly historically inaccurate fact. The vote was 316 to 2 in favor of Athanasius and against Arius the heretic. So Dan Brown, the author of the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, really just a historically uninformed individual. So be careful where you're getting your ideas from. Be careful when people are making statements about things that they haven't really been trained in or haven't really done a lot of reading or studying in it. And even what you hear, what you see and hear here on Intelligent Faith 315, I encourage you, don't believe me. Test what I say. Test what we are giving out to you as historical evidence and philosophical evidence and scientific evidence. You are responsible to make your own choices and your direction in life. And in the book of Acts, chapter 17, verse 11, you also need to be like the people of Berea. Paul the Apostle said the people of Berea were more noble than those in Thessalonica because they tested what Paul said. Every lecture he gave them, every teaching, they compared it with their scriptures to see whether those things were actually so. So you have your own responsibility to test what we are saying, but definitely test what guys like Dan Brown are saying, because Dan Brown is certainly no New Testament or early church historical scholar. He makes an incredible amount of errors, and it's unfortunate that so many people are taken in by what he says. But the correct evidence and historical research is there if they'll just avail themselves of it. So anyway, here we go. The Gospel of Thomas. And this is referred to by Dan Brown. That's why I bring up his name. So the Gospel of Thomas. This book describes itself in the opening statement as, quote, the secret sayings which the living Jesus spoke. So this is, of course, why the Gnostics were attracted to this book, because Gnostics, the name for their group, comes from the Greek word gnosis, which means secret knowledge. So the scholar Grant notes that this collection of teachings thereby is supposedly the words of the risen Jesus, thus accounting for the almost complete absence of statements concerning his birth and life and death. So you're not going to see anything in the Gospel of Thomas about his birth or life or death, because it claims to be statements of the risen Jesus. This text is usually dated from around 140 to 200 AD, so you're into the 2nd century here, although it reflects thought of even earlier periods, and as such it might present some accurate facts concerning Jesus. It could present some accurate facts. So let's get into it. In an incident similar to Jesus' question at Caesarea Philippi, you can read that in Matthew 16, reported in the Synoptic Gospels, the Gospel of Thomas also presents Jesus asking his disciples this question, quote, compare me to someone and tell me whom I am like. And they then respond by describing him, quote, here we go, as an angel, a philosopher, and as an indescribable personage. In a later passage, the disciples refer to Jesus as the consummation of the prophets. Jesus is said to have partially answered his own question on several occasions. He describes himself in the Gospel of Thomas as the Son of Man, which is also the name most commonly reported in the Gospels. On other occasions, he speaks of himself in more lofty terms. To Salome, in the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus states, quote, I am he who existed from the undivided, capital U there, undivided. I was given some of the things of my Father, unquote. And elsewhere, he speaks of himself as the Son in the Gospel of Thomas. In another instance, Jesus speaks in more specifically Gnostic terminology. Jesus said, quote, it is I who am the light which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. And that last line is in the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there. And of course, if you know anything about the different worldviews that exist, this is pantheism. It's monism. So this is not the type of view of God, of the transcendental view, the spiritual view of God that the New Testament endorses. And this is not the type of theology that Jesus taught in the New Testament historical documents. This is very, very different. It's very, very strange. So there are definitely some interesting historical nuggets that we can draw from these documents, because they do refer back to the historical existence of the man, Jesus of Nazareth. But when it comes to theological information, these documents run in a head-on collision with the fantastic historical verifiable documents of the New Testament. So good for history, bad for theology, these documents here. Again, that line, Jesus said this, "It is I who am the light, which is above them all. It is I who am the all. From me did the all come forth, and unto me did the all extend. Split a piece of wood, and I am there. Lift up the stone, and you will find me there." That is in the Da Vinci Code towards the end of the movie, if I remember correctly. So regarding the historical nuggets we can draw from this document, Dr. Habermas says this: "In these passages which concern the identity of Jesus, we are told, number one, Jesus asked his disciples for their view. Number two, their responses were varied, with a comparison of Jesus to a philosopher, being especially reminiscent of the references by Lucian and Marbar Serapion." So Dr. Habermas is saying that there's some connection here between what this document says about Jesus historically and what the other documents from Lucian and Marbar Serapion said about Jesus. So that's interesting historical connection. Good corroboration there. Jesus then identified himself, number 3, as the Son of Man, number 4, as the Son of his Father, and 5, as the all of the universe. The Gospel of Thomas also records a parable concerning the death of Jesus and relates his subsequent exaltation. Again, Jesus is identified as, quote, living, or, quote, the living one, a reference to his post-resurrection life. These references relate, historical fact number 6, the death of Jesus, and number 7, his exaltation as a result of his resurrection from the dead. So again, if we look purely to those historical nuggets we can withdraw out of the passage, it is interesting, and there's some historical corroboration to the other documents from Lucian and Marbar Serapion, which we've already covered, and I encourage you to look at the previous posting we did on that. Additionally, the overly obvious Gnostic tendencies, such as those found in the identification of Jesus with the undivided and with the all, including monistic tendencies, and monism sees all of reality as one. So this is why in the Gnostic document here, Christ is referring to himself and to God as the all, as the undivided. This is a type of monism or pantheism. It casts doubt on the reliability of these reports theologically. So the historical nuggets are interesting. Let's go on to the next one, the Treatise on the Resurrection. This is another Gnostic document. This book is addressed to an individual named Reginos by an unknown author. Some have postulated that Valentinus is the author, but most scholars object to this hypothesis. The ideas are somewhat Valentian, which could point to the presence of earlier ideas, but it's probably better to date the work itself from around the late 2nd century. So around, between 250 to maybe 290 AD, something of that nature. For the author of the Treatise of the Resurrection, Jesus became a human being, but was still divine. Here's a quote. "The Lord existed in flesh and revealed himself as the Son of God. Now the Son of God, Reginos, was a Son of Man. He embraced them both, possessing the humanity and the divinity, so that on the one hand he might vanquish death through his being the Son of God, and then on the other, through the Son of Man, the restoration to the pleroma might occur. Because he was originally from above, a seed of the truth, before this structure of the cosmos had come into being." Unquote. In this passage, we find much Gnostic terminology in addition to the teachings. Here's the historical facts. Number 1, that Jesus became flesh as the Son of Man, in spite of, number 2, his true divinity as the Son of God who conquers death. So, I guess I don't have to say those are historical facts, but those are historical nuggets that we can definitely identify this document is claiming or referring to. So number 1, he became flesh as the Son of Man. Number 2, his true divinity as the Son of God. Jesus came into this world in the flesh of a man, died and rose again. Here's another quote. "For we have known the Son of Man, and we have believed that he rose again from among the dead. This is he of whom we say, quote, he became the destruction of death, as he is a great one in whom they believe." Unquote. Great are those who believe. Unquote. In less esoteric language, we are told, that Jesus, number 3, Jesus died. Number 4, Jesus rose again. And number 5, he thereby destroyed death for those who believe in him. And we are told of Jesus' resurrection in other passages as well. Quote, "The Savior swallowed up death. He transformed himself into an imperishable aeon," and the aeons for the Gnostics were a sort of emanation out from the original creator, good, and then they became increasingly evil and so forth, and the last aeon was evil, created the material universe and world. Therefore, the physical material world for the Gnostics was evil. So most of them, not all of them, but most of them believe that Jesus didn't have a physical, corporeal body, because to them, physical matter was evil. So again, it says, the Savior swallowed up death, and he transformed himself into an imperishable eon. In other words, one of these supernatural small g gods, and raised himself up, having swallowed the visible by the invisible, and he gave us the way of our immortality. And the writer says of this document, "Do not think the resurrection is an illusion. It is no illusion, but it is truth. Indeed, it is more fitting to say that the world is an illusion rather than the resurrection, which has come into being through our Lord, the Savior, Jesus Christ." Unquote. So, very heavy Gnostic spiritual tendencies in this document, of course. These two quotations even present an interesting contrast on the subject of Jesus' death and resurrection. While the first statement is mixed with Gnostic terminology, the second statement assures believers that the resurrection was not an illusion, which reminds us of some Gnostic tendencies to deny the actual physical death of Christ. So he was trying to reassure his reader, Reginos, that don't think that the resurrection was some kind of an illusion because it was based in the physical world. It was actually true and historically took place. Interesting comment. Since Jesus has been raised, the author counseled Reginos, quote, "Already you have the resurrection. Why not consider yourself as risen and already brought to this?" Thus he is encouraged not to, quote, "continue as if you are going to die." In other words, the resurrection of Jesus thereby, to the reader, to the historical Reginos, provides practical considerations in causing the believer to realize he already has eternal life presently and shouldn't live in fear of death. This teaching is similar to that of the New Testament, Colossians 3, Hebrews 2, and gives added significance to the report of Lucian, remember we covered his writings in a previous posting, of Christians who believe that they are immortal and thus unafraid of death. So again, there's a historical connection, historical corroboration with the writings of Lucian to this aspect of not being afraid of death because of the reality of the resurrection. Once again, these previous 4 sources are theologically oriented, freely incorporating many Gnostic tendencies. In other words, their theology is not according with the theology of the Old Testament or New Testament, and those statements are counter the Jesus that we see in the New Testament. But historically, there are some interesting nuggets and references that we can draw out of them, in addition to being generally later than most of our other sources. While these 2 qualifications don't necessitate unreliable reporting of the historical facts, we should be cautious in our use of this data. So, interesting documents, the Treatise on the Resurrection and the Gospel of Thomas. Next time, we're going to continue with some other Gnostic sources, and then we're going to finish up this series with some Jewish sources. We might even go quickly through some of the references in the Quran which reference Jesus as well. So that's it for today. Hope you guys enjoy that. Do encourage you again just to look on the website, and Nellis has actually rearranged the postings so that all of the historical postings we've done on the ancient non-Christian historical evidence, they're categorized under a single page. You can click on that page, just go through them real quick again, download this paper from Dr. Habermas, and equip yourself with how to give an answer when someone asks you, can we historically know or demonstrate or prove that Jesus of Nazareth historically existed as a verifiable personage in history? And one of the great things you can take them to are these 17 non-Christian historical references. Okay, so God bless you guys. Have a great day. And until next time, have an intelligent faith.